All right, good morning again, Chicago.
Good morning, Chicago. It's like we're hosting like a chat show or something.
Yeah. So what should we talk about, Rumi?
I would love to talk about, I think, all the opportunities. I don't know, I'm not sure if this was one of the questions you asked about the participants here today, but who here is visiting Chicago for this conference? Well, thank you for coming versus the Chicagoans, I guess, that I
And
assume
local
are here.
Chicago people? Who's local here?
Right.
All right,
That's great.
that's awesome.
Because I will have to say, I mean, obviously when the whole blockchain and cryptocurrency story started to percolate around 4 or 5 years ago, and a number of startups emerged on the scene, I think we found a lot of those startups were in San Francisco or New York, London, some of the usual suspects. But you know, you and I know this really well. Just what has happened in Chicago in the past few years is amazing. And I just want to talk a little bit about what I've seen in these years and why this is. And for anyone out there who has a startup or has a startup that wants to scale, I just want to encourage you to consider Chicago for all the positive attributes that it has here.
Yeah, I mean, we've come such a long way. I remember, 4 or 5 years ago, saying Bitcoin was just like, are you nuts? This is like drug money, and not many people in Chicago had any kind of appreciation or backdrop in it. Rumi was one of the very few in Chicago that I was able to commiserate with and talk about this new tech and crypto and everything else. And Rumi was right, because you travel around the world, you go to conferences like this in London or Singapore or whatever, and then you come back to Chicago and it was like crickets, right? And you're just like, what is going on? This is Chicago. And think about the supply chain, the geographic location, the trading with CBOE, CME, all that. It's got all these natural resources, but it was like kind of devoid of this new tech, this new shiny crypto, kind of dynamic. And so, to kind of put the heart defibrillators on the city, right, and say, like, let's amp this up. Rumi was part of this kind of wave with me and several others to try and create that dialogue and not only, go to cocktail parties and events here, but also in the, we had a Chicago Bitcoin Center a few years ago, transformed into Chicago Blockchain Center. Yeah, we're like marketing geniuses. But you needed that kind of, to Lexi's point, you needed that kind of a center of gravity to have a dialogue or have a resource, or somebody says, hey, I don't get it, just help me out, or I've got a business plan, can you connect me, or I need money, or I need a developer, or anything in this space to have that kind of start button or that menu of services to get this city going. And so, again, we're still early, we still have a ton of work to do. It's going to be a lot of fun too.
Oh, I totally agree. And I say this, I should preface it, I'm not from Chicago, actually. I've lived in 7 different countries, and in California and New York, I mean, you name it. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm talking my own book, but hopefully I'm talking from experience about why I think Chicago is the best place to scale a company, and why blockchain and crypto in particular speak to a lot of its natural advantages. Obviously, we're here today. I think with the Distributed Markets Conference in particular, there's a focus on financial services. I don't need to tell you all that in terms of both sides of the blockchain crypto story, right? The cryptocurrency aspect, as well as the digital infrastructure aspect. Chicago has a long legacy of innovation in both. Whether you're one of the exchanges with clearinghouses that currently are the trusted central counterparties for every buyer and seller, or you provide the infrastructure currently for all electronic trading, blockchain really speaks to the heart of that. So there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of experience that enable that continued growth. And then the other side, obviously, being cryptocurrency and the number of types of asset classes that are traded in Chicago. This is a city of traders from all different types of products, not just a stock, far more than that. And I think so what we've seen in the past few years has just been an explosion on both the blockchain side and the crypto side. So if you are a startup, if you're an investor, you have both covered here. And at the same time, it's also not just financial services, right? If you think of Chicago's legacy of manufacturing and how that translates into IoT, and how IoT can work with blockchain technologies. You think about the supply chain, the food issues, this river, this lake, issues around provenance and identity, also have a legacy advantage here in Chicago. So for all these reasons, I think that there's a lot more here. And certainly even for those startups outside that are thinking about scaling their businesses, I certainly say Chicago is probably one of the best places to scale in general, but particularly in this new emerging field.
Yeah, and like blockchain for a lot of the public companies in Chicago that are regulated, 3-4 years ago, they really didn't get it. They were kind of like, and most big public regulated industries have antibodies in place to say, I'm going to reject new technology, it's a risk, et cetera. And you see this over the last decade where people have fintech innovation groups, innovation teams, and are starting to figure out how to consume new tech because it's no longer, duct taping themselves to the internet or mobile or getting pressure tested by various market events. This is now a core competency to stay relevant as a company. The S&P 500, the dynamics of that are much different today than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago. You see the market caps of the biggest companies. They're very different. They used to be the Exxons and the GEs and the Walmarts. Now they're Amazon and Apple and the rest of it. Software is eating the world, no question about it. These networks are starting to come into focus. And now you're seeing these digital cooperatives come together. And so what I find interesting is like enterprise, when they kind of think about blockchain, they kind of are devoid of crypto, right? Because that's kind of weird and unregulated. And so let's employ blockchain technology to move value and data cheaper, faster, better internally or with some partners. And that's awesome. That's a step function to kind of get up the staircase, if you will. It's kind of missing a little bit of the point of the power of incentives when you tokenize a particular network. So, kind of V1 for a lot of companies is like, well, let's figure out a way to save cost and time and make something more efficient and then maybe figure out how to grow. And then this whole disruptive piece, whether somebody finds a way to create a new ecosystem, a new platform, a new network, or be a participant in somebody else's, I think that's going to be the next kind of massive wave of the tokenization of things. I think you're going to see a lot more of that happen, especially as the regulatory dynamics get a little better. I think we're going to see more regulatory action in this space in the next 6 months than we've seen in the last 6 years. It's just going to be a very topical thing for regulators to get their arms around, because if you don't get it right, people move to Israel, Singapore, Switzerland. We're seeing a lot of this, and this isn't like the proverbial, we're going to create the new Wall Street or Silicon Valley. This will make a dent. These are trillion-dollar networks, new money, new identity, new layers of the internet. And I think that dynamic is going to make every regulator sit up straight in their chair, pay attention, and figure this out rationally, because the stakes are way too high.
Right, and Illinois has been a leader. I mean, it was very nice of the governor to film that, but he means it. I mean, you can look at what Illinois has done with its Illinois Blockchain Initiative, and Jennifer O'Rourke, who is part of that, will be speaking with you later on today, but it's been very proactive, very welcoming, and trying to be as clear as possible, right? To be able to provide the right framework for people to feel comfortable and confident about building their blockchain businesses here. To the point where now, actually, maybe a month or so ago, Forbes magazine came out with a list of the cities with the top blockchain jobs in America, the best cities to have a blockchain company, and Chicago came in number 4, ahead of even cities like Atlanta and Palo Alto even. That is the type of growth, I think, that I've been so proud to have seen, and I'm sure will continue at all levels, whether it's from the city of Chicago or at the state level. We do have an election this year, but the Democratic candidate, Governor Pritzker, has been a venture investor, also very focused on innovation. I just don't think that you'll find any policy leader in Illinois that will say they do not want you to innovate. They'll encourage innovation in this space.
I'm always fascinated, why a president or a governor or mayor doesn't say, I want to be the tech mayor, the tech governor, or in this case, like the blockchain. You have very little to lose, because on your watch, probably like a Uber or a Google or something spawned, and you can take credit for that. But in this case, why not just go all in and say, manufacturing jobs and all these things that sometimes don't move the needle as much, but getting great tech jobs and getting kind of high, brain power jobs in a geography like Chicago or Illinois really moves the needle. And I think if they kind of stood up and said that, and I think Ronner and Pritzker both have that DNA behind them. And I'm always fascinated why they just don't say, I want to be the tech governor. It's like it's for the taking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think for everyone that talks about innovation, so many other people are scared of the flip side of it, which is disruption, right? Thinking that their jobs might become obsolete as a result. But this is, again, where I feel, at least in the Chicago story, it's not either or. It's just a continued evolution, drawing, like I said, from our financial services space into fintech, from manufacturing to IoT. It's just an evolution from open outcry pit trading to electronic trading to digital trading that we're now entering into today. So I agree, but maybe you and I should run for office then. Have that be our pitch and staff.
And Chicago is interesting because it's like from a venture perspective, from an entrepreneur's perspective, it's a lot different than Silicon Valley. A lot of pragmatism. A lot of, show me data, show me traction, very, very different style of investing. I think that's born into this kind of Midwestern cash flow driven, kind of old economy, pragmatism has stayed.
Yeah, and that's an important point to make though, because you and I both know as venture investors, there could be a lot more blockchain companies here that have been well capitalized, right? It's true that I think that a number of venture investors in Chicago tend to want to see revenue much earlier. They also tend to say, well, show me what's real, versus a lot of the moonshot approaches that you might see get funded on California, for example. Yeah. But that being said, I think as mentioned, we've come a long way, and I think the venture community in general continues to be very active. I ran the CME Group's venture group, and we were investors in companies like Ripple and Digital Currency Group and Digital Asset Holdings in the space, as well as Filament. DRW Holdings also has DRW Ventures, another group in town investing in crypto and blockchain companies, as well as Jump. And I think Peter from Jump is going to be here as well. Jump Capital. So more and more, you're starting to see investors in Chicago investing in this space. Perhaps the ones that got in earlier maybe had more of a trading DNA, but it's becoming more broad-based now. So that's the type of movement that I'm encouraged to see, but definitely want to see more of, as well as encouraging all startups who want to scale more broadly to come to Chicago because of all the advantages that we talked about.
What I find fascinating on that point is in Chicago, so you have a lot of trading, right? Obviously with the kind of the ripple effects of a CME, a CBOE, and you mentioned DRW, Jump, there's CMT Digital, there's all these trading shops in Chicago that got early into trading crypto. The thing I find fascinating is that they're also mindful to think about investing in the next layer and the next infrastructure, whether it's new software layers or exchanges or things that are in their kind of wheelhouse, and they're kind of looking forward to seeing where this goes versus just like day trading or whatever, which I think is very mindful. The other thing is in this town, this pragmatism, et cetera, and being in this space for a while, you feel like, you could kind of see around corners, or you could predict certain things. It's like nonsense. This industry changes, the pace of innovation is incredible, and you always get surprised in these pleasant ways. One thing that honestly surprised me was CME's kind of dive into this space with Bitcoin futures. I thought that was something that took, and it was out there kind of in the fall, and they had this aggressive timeline, and I'm like, that's going to get blown, and they kind of made their timeline. So super impressive in terms of idea, execution, and now kind of finding that utility and seeing that happen. How did that come about, and from your perspective? And you've been in the CME organization for a while, but that was kind of impressive to me in this town and for CME.
Sure. Well, and it's not just the CME with Bitcoin futures, right? SIBO also launched Bitcoin futures as well. So I think it speaks again to the eagerness to innovate and explore in this town, even if you might be a 170-year-old institution like the CME. that you are always looking to be able to work for your customers and where customers had their demand. Certainly at that point was in cryptocurrencies, I believe. But it may also seem like speed, but on the other hand, I and the venture group had been focusing on cryptocurrency since 2013, right? So it also, I think, was a culmination of 4 years of learning and 4 years of investing, and in addition to all the great work that people within the CME, and I'm sure SIBO as well, did internally to make sure that that these products were successful. And I believe in a later talk, Julie Winkler from the CME as well as the SIBO will be talking about their products in more detail. You know, full disclosure, I did not work on the Bitcoin futures product, but I was very proud to be part of the broader efforts regarding digitization at the CME.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see other cryptos getting productized on CME and otherwise. Seeing that continued evolution is going to be cool to watch. Okay, so any questions from the audience? I would love to open it up to any Q&A. There's
Sure.
Go for it.
Okay, so the question is the CME considering blockchain volatility products or indices? I do not know. I'm not at the CME right now, but when Julie is up here later on, perhaps you can ask her that question.
I think it's a pretty good bet that they probably will. You know, it's like it's perfect for them, productized.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just shout it, stand and shout. Yeah.
Yes. Rumi, you had mentioned that Chicago was rated number 4 in the world in terms of blockchain. Who are the 3 ahead of us that we need to overtake?
Yeah, it was New York, San Francisco, and Boston. Okay. Yeah, but don't worry, we're going to overtake them. All right.
Okay.
To get the SEC to give safe harbor for utility tokens, which would be great, I mean, for entrepreneurship all around this space. Are you guys involved with that at all? Is the Chicago Blockchain Center going to be part of that effort kind of thing?
There is a tremendous amount of calorie burn in DC thinking and figuring out the right dialogue with the SEC, the CFTC, and lots of agencies. Specific to that, the Chamber of Digital Commerce last year launched the Token Alliance, which is chaired by a former sitting commissioner of the SEC and a former chairman of the CFTC, to develop a lot of these frameworks, create that bridge, that dialogue, and everything from the safe harbor to certain exclusions, getting a better path to no action letters. All these things are now part of the dialogue. I think the SEC over the last 3 months has been very vociferous in terms of trying to pump the brakes on some of the dynamics in this space. I think it's been in certain areas been overheated, and in certain areas the big quality, even there's a few public companies that even want to tokenize a particular network. There's lots of capital trying to find the right structure and do things responsibly. So I think it's a process, it's a journey, it's a new dynamic. I mean, Bitcoin, the whole ecosystem went from basically 16 million January last year to now 300-400 billion. And so now it's of consequence. Now they have to deal with it, and the volume of money and investors and everything else is now something they have to pay attention to. They're trying to figure it out. They don't have great answers because kind of the booklet they look at doesn't have a really good definition for crypto or utility or any of these other things that are basically completely new ground. But this industry is responsible to kind of help that out. Everything from your local congressman to the SEC to everything in between, to amp up that dialogue. And if you care deeply about this space, which everybody in the room does, you got to spend the time and do that. So that's one of many efforts that are at play in DC. Almost now on a regular weekly basis, there's something happening. So it's a work in progress at best right now.
Hey Matt, I'm over here. How is Chicago Blockchain Center, how are you guys educating businesses to understand the nature of blockchain and how things are evolving? Because I think so many companies that are more established, they're looking out there and saying, well, what do I do? How do I go about it? If they're not even looking at it from a development standpoint and an investor standpoint, what are you guys doing to help businesses understand that better?
That's a great question.
I think
We'll just wrap it up on this one. But it's a great question. It's something that a lot of companies have in mind because, a lot of companies, it should be top down, right? There's a saying that I got from Phil Gomez that, innovation from the top down is orderly and dumb. Innovation from the bottom up is chaotic and smart. And so you got to find that kind of equilibrium in big companies because you got people, process, tech, that antibody thing. But it's a process. What I find interesting is that in every company there's a handful of folks that just love this tech, love this space, and they're always trying to get their boss or their boss's boss to get inspired about the transformational dynamics of blockchain or crypto. And it's a long process. It's like talking about the internet in 1994, and they're like, that's crazy. And then, it starts to unfold. And so I would stay relentless about it. It's Chicago Blockchain Center, does events and meetups and has thought leadership programs all the time. And hopefully one of those things will help inspire and create a better dialogue. That's the purpose of it. So.
Matt, that was
Thank
great.
you.